Hi, this is Danny with Abolish Abortion California, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that pastors and other Christians are finding surprising in the circulating title of our petition. Specifically in this video, I wanted to talk about IVF and birth control. So many Christians believe that both IVF and birth control are one, IVF helps people have children, and secondly, that birth control helps people not have abortions. And so these two things are ideas that we hold in our head, but they must be tested with reality. So the reality in the IVF procedure is that in order to keep the cost down, when they do harvest the eggs from the woman and the sperm from the male and create these humans in the laboratory, they actually make more than they need. So they'll make approximately 10 babies, let's say, when a person would like one child. Now they do this because the chances of the embryo surviving are not very good. So they make more that they know are not actually even wanted. So the parents don't actually want 10 children, they just want one or two, and so they make tons more than they need. And these extra children sit in freezers across the nation. So we have a friends close by that this week their child was born, who they adopted from one of these freezers. Someone didn't want they're called snowflake babies. Someone didn't want their snowflake baby, and so they adopted this child from a freezer, and from the parents, of course, that the child was kept in the freezer, and they just gave birth to that child. And so some Christians are actively rescuing these babies that are held in freezers across the nation. The rest of them who don't get adopted are just going to be thrown away or donated to medical research. And so the IVF procedure actually kills many more human beings than it helps to bring into the world. And although the procedure itself, it may be okay to do for a husband and wife who want one child to create one child and try to have that child. It is not ethical to create 10 children knowing that 9 of them are unwanted and will most likely be thrown away or used for medical research. So IVF is a procedure that will be outlawed, or IVF procedures that do this, that create children that are unwanted and are destined for destruction, will be eliminated. They'll be illegal under our amendment. And the second thing that they're finding surprising is it says birth control. They want to know what type of birth control. People want to know what type of birth control does our amendment outlaw. And they think that we should have some list of all the birth controls that this amendment would outlaw, but we don't. And the reason we don't is we don't need to. All we have to do is qualify, 1, what is an abortion, and 2, what is a human being. And according to the law and the medical definition, an abortion is the intentional killing of a human being, either by instruments or by medication. And a human being is the scientific definition. The human life starts at conception. So when we say what abortion is, and when we say clearly what a human being is, what that means is that many birth controls that are being used today are in fact killing a human being intentionally. So I was surprised when I learned that birth control medication actually causes abortion. I want to be clear, condoms and diaphragms and things used like that do not cause abortions. They prevent pregnancy through stopping the sperm getting to the egg. So that is how they function, and they are not abortions. But any birth control medication, in research, any birth control medication that is taken, such as the regular pill that is given to almost the majority of women, or Plan B, or an IV, the implanted device, they all have an abortifacient property to them. Most people are aware that Plan B has an abortifacient property to it, but if you're not, what you can do to find that out is you can go right to Plan B's One Step, their website. So I did that, I went to their website. I don't know if you could see that very clearly, but that's right from the Plan B website. There's their logo from the other page. So Plan B's website, under the section of how does Plan B one-step work, it says it works mainly by stopping the release of an egg from the ovary. Now, if it stops the release of an egg, that is not an abortion. So that part of how it works is not an abortion. But it also says it's possible that it may work by preventing the fertilization of an egg. Now, that's also not an abortion. Preventing it, so when the sperm doesn't make contact with the egg, that's not an abortion. And so it works in two ways that are not an abortion. But the third way, it says, or by preventing the attachment, implantation to the uterus or womb. Now, they don't say what they're preventing the attachment from doing. They just say it prevents attachment. Now, that is assumed to be the attachment of the embryo that was fertilized. And we have to go to, let's see. So when we check the average pill, so again, doing research, making sure we're just saying what they say. So Plan B says that it stops the implantation of an embryo. So that is an abortifacient property. So is that present in the normal birth control? I went online and I just searched what is the most popular brand of birth control. It came up with Alice, I think that's how you say it. So I have things from WebMD, from the RX list, pharmacy, from drugs.com on Alice, and from, well, that's the different one, that's IUD. So I went on and we looked at all these forms and they all say the same thing. Now, birth control pill also works in the three different ways, all three ways. So when you take Alice, it works in all three ways. It's not like you buy a different birth control to work in these different ways. When you buy a birth control pill and you take that, it is working in all three of the ways. And the first way, again, is to stop the egg from coming down, and that is not an abortion. The second way is to thicken the lining of the uterus, and that prevents the sperm from getting to the egg, and that is not an abortion. But here it says, and changes the lining of the uterus, the womb, to prevent attachment of a fertilized egg. If a fertilized egg does not attach to the uterus, it passes out of the body. Okay? That is an abortion. Okay? That is taking a chemical that thins the lining of the uterus. Now, if you're not familiar, the uterus is where an embryo attaches, and when a woman goes through a cycle, that uterine wall actually thickens to prepare for the child. Now, taking this pill does the exact opposite. It thins the lining of the uterus. It makes it harder for that child to implant. Now, it is, no one says, and it is true that not the pills are not killing children all the time, but it's also true that they do actually cause abortions. They have to. If birth control is not 100% active, meaning that if you're on birth control, you can still, it's possible you get pregnant. It's also possible in all those forms that egg is fertilized and comes down to the uterine wall, and since the uterine wall has been poisoned, so it's thinning rather than thickening, that causes that child to be unable to attach where it's supposed to, and it is then flushed out of the body. And so that would be an abortifacient property of the drug. So, and then IUD is another one. Now, IUD, I looked up at the government's website because my understanding was that IUD, all of them, cause the same thing, the thinning of the lining of the uterus, and stop implantation, as well as the other three. So it's important to remember, birth control medication works in three ways. So on the government's website, it says the Paragard IUD, also known as the copper T-IUD, may prevent implantation. Again, there it is. But it actually doesn't say what the other two, whether or not they do. So I went and checked each one of the three different kinds. Again, confirming the Paragard does cause abortion. It says this is from the Paragard website. And it says right there, possibly prevents implantation. So maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. but it would have to do that. It does thin the lining of the uterus. So I wanted to check the other two IUDs, and we have Marina and Skyla. Now, what these two do, which is interesting, is they actually say something very interesting. They say how this drug works. This one is Marina. How this drug works is it inhibits sperm from reaching the fertilized egg, it thickens the cervic mucus to prevent sperm from entering the uterus, and it thins the lining of the uterus. So it does all three things again. But instead of talking about the embryo and how that would not be able to attach, what they say, it is not known exactly how these actions work together to prevent pregnancy. Now, when I researched this years ago, I believe they all said that it prevents implantation. But now they're saying they just don't know how it works. But they do know that it thins the lining of the uterus. So I would, and the same thing, they say the same thing in Skyla. So you can see this. I thought that was a good diagram to show how these do all three things. All these chemicals that we're using do all three things, including thinning the lining of the uterus. Now, a lot of people, when you talk to them about birth control, they'll say things like, no, what birth control does is it stops the egg from coming down. And that's true, it does. And they'll also say, well, it stops the sperm from getting to the egg. And that's true, it does that too. But what they don't know, or they don't realize, is that it also will stop the fertilized egg from implanting in the uterine wall. So you wonder, why don't people know this? Why don't they know that it is a possibility when they're taking birth control medication that they are having an abortion? And I think really the reason is because we don't want to know, because the information, again, is available. We can go to their websites and look. But it's also being aided by the birth control giant, Planned Parenthood. So this is right off their website. And so what I find interesting is Planned Parenthood makes no mention in here of thinning the lining of the uterus and not allowing the embryo to implant. So I believe that's deceptive, although their statements aren't deceptive. They say if sperm can't make it to the egg, pregnancy can't happen. And they say no egg and no pregnancy. And those are true. But what they don't say is, which you can imply, so if you can get pregnant on an IUD, and that is possible, everyone says it's not 100% effective, that means that the sperm does get to the egg sometimes, and that means the third way of working will happen. I've read some statistics that say that a sexually active woman on birth control will have, I think it was like 1.8 abortions a year. So again, we're not saying that this is having abortion with every time, and that all these drugs do is cause abortion. What we're saying is that these drugs do cause abortion in some cases. Now, just because we don't know when or how this happens, it doesn't mean that we should support and use this medicine that actually can have the potential of killing a human being.